Just take a deep breath with me, everybody. I want you, if you can, pinch some part of your body gently, but go ahead and pinch it. I want you just to notice the sensation. Notice if the blood, you can feel the blood or see the blood coming back up to that part of your skin. Perhaps you also notice you might be breathing. At least I hope you are. Notice your breath coming into your lungs or being expelled through your nose or mouth. Perhaps if you're still enough, you might even notice your heartbeat. Or perhaps your pulse. All these are signs that you are alive, that you're living and breathing. And today, I have a wonderful guest who I'll introduce in a moment, who will share her story of how her vital signs were almost compromised at a certain point in her own life. But before we do that, I just want to welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Valerie Hope, and I am your host for this weekly show, Time to Come Alive. Always so honored to have fantastic conversations that help us become more conscious, get more connected with one another, and then also be more creative in the world. And today is no exception. I'd like to introduce you to my new friend. I'm going to call you a new friend, Darlene. Darlene Parris-Young. Darlene and I have never met in person. This is our first time ever meeting. We had a wonderful phone conversation because we were introduced by a mutual friend, LaRue Epler. LaRue has been such a lifesaver for me. She knows everybody. And I literally, Darlene, I mentioned to LaRue at one point that, it would be so amazing to have a conversation with somebody who's had a near-death experience. And she said, I know who the person is. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then she connected the two of us. And ever since, I've had an opportunity to get to know a little bit about you and your story. And I'm so honored that you're here this morning. What would you like for us to know about you as a way of introduction?
It's funny, though, the name. Thank you, by the way, for inviting me here today. But I love the name, is Time to Come Alive.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened with my near-death experience. But I think what I will talk about that later when you prompt me to do it. I think one of the things I want them to take away with me talking to them today, that we have all been knocked on our butt one time or another. And sometimes it's very hard to get up because that baggage is so hard to pick up. And as we get up, we often pick up the baggage of other people that we love. And we don't see things. We get so familiar with the pain and the heaviness that it's the norm. And we live in fear. And what is false? What is fear? False evidence appearing real. Now take all of that apart and see what is false about this. And one of the things with my near-death experience, I learned there was a lot of false stuff being taught here on this side of the veil. I would love to share with you. I won't be picking on any faith or anything, but sometimes we're taught things that are not always true or universal.
No picking on faiths here for sure. But I love the acronym you gave for fear. I remember Wayne Dyer used to say that all the time. False evidence appearing real. So, well, Darlene, what we know so far about you is obviously that you're just radiant and enthusiastic and passionate about living. Thank goodness that you're here to tell the story. And we'll go into that in just a moment. So talk to me a little bit about when LaRue connected you and me, and I said, I'm going to talk to you about a near-death experience. Can you tell me about it? What went through your mind? What made you decide that, yeah, this is what I want to talk about?
It was the promise that I had made just before I was going over on the other side. Would you like me to speak about the experience?
Yeah, let's just go right into it.
Because I came from a background raised by a very strong, heavy family, war hero dad, brought the war home with him. He had, well, you grew up with a lot of fear. And it wasn't for me, it wasn't false evidence appearing real. It was frig everything and run. And all I did was run away from the things that scared the hell out of me. Well, here I am. I'm finally leaving New Hampshire and in New York City in a modeling career that became very successful. And I decided to move down the Jersey Shore for some free time. But I was all closed off. And I met a man, how do I put this? We had got married a year later, and I was carrying that fear inside of me still. It's like I brought that all my baggage right back into this marriage. And he had his own. So I decided, I'm going to get a self-help book. I'm going to talk myself through this. This was after I spoke with Lou Rue, because this was years later. So I went out, and this self-help book just jumped off the shelves. And don't they always?
Yeah.
And the name of it was Defy Gravity. Caroline Mice? Mm-hmm. So I went home and told my husband I was booking a cruise, and we were going on this cruise, and we were going to meet Caroline Mice, and there was Wayne Dyer and John Holland and Brian Weiss, many lives, many lap masters. And I said, we're going to study. And he said, no, darling, I'm way too booked up. And I couldn't go. So I invited my best friend, Betty. She always game for anything. And so we started out on the trip. My husband rode us to the airport. I was not feeling well. But I thought I was exhausted, because now this is January and we had a lot of bookings to get out before the end of the month. And so Betty was exhausted. She works in the Diamond District. We just had a lot on our plate, but we got there, we're on board ship, their first day there, and they're right up, we go upstairs and have a drink, and we sit down at the bar, and there she is, Caroline Mice. And Betty just pokes me in the shoulder, says, go up and talk to her. She's your hero. And I says, no, this is her downtime, and I'm always playing the, you know. And I really didn't want to bother her. But guess what? I missed out on the opportunity to talk to somebody that I really wanted to talk to. Because the next day, I was going to be having my near-death experience. The pain had gotten to the point that I couldn't even breathe. And so the next morning, I went down to the infirmary where they take care of everybody, and they had panic on their face. And so they called the US Coast Guard. And the US Coast Guard came in. Here I am in the middle of the ocean. And they tried to land on the Westerdam. The name of the ship was the Westerdam. And the funny thing, the name of this program I was studying was called You Can Do It at Sea.
It's a Hay House conference. What better place to have this experience than at a Hay House conference? Oh my goodness. Okay, I can't. Go ahead, please.
I did it at sea. So they call the Coast Guard, and here they have me in. My girlfriend Betty is funny though, because she's looking out the little port window. She sees two dolphins, and she said, "Don, there's going to be a miracle happen today. You're going to be fine." I see two dolphins, and I got a chuckle out of Betty. But here I am. They're strapping me on. Oh, wait a minute. Can you see the picture?
Yeah.
Can you see the
yes, I see it.
coastline?
Yes. So okay. Well, before the helicopter, what happened? You saw the dolphins, and
they put me in the gurney, and they were wheeling me down the hallway to put me into the basket that they're dropping from the helicopter. Everybody else has to stay in their room because he says it's being televised and nobody is to be around the helicopter or anything. So now they strap me in this basket. I had enough pain. It was physically very painful. I didn't know at the time, but my appendix had burst and the poison was all through my system. And so how do I put it? Well, I mean, I told you I had a successful career, but like any career in the modeling field, there are some drawbacks with predators. Read between the lines, please. And bad marriages. I always walk out. I never fix anything. My daughter was going through a horrific divorce. Just a lot on my plate. So I started to swing that basket. I was trying to loosen the ropes. I wanted to fall into the sea. I wanted to be part of that water. I wanted to be part of the peace.
Well, hey, just to help everybody catch up real quick. So you're on the ship, you're on a cruise ship that is designed to help you live your best life, basically. It's a conference put on by Hay House Publishing Company. Mm-hmm. Some of the greatest authors about self-help, right, on the planet in that particular ship. You start feeling ill. It happens to be your appendix, so they have to medevac you off this plane, off the cruise ship. But so as you were going in the basket to the helicopter, you were having all these flashbacks. Is that what you're saying about these
Get it
areas
out.
of your life that were, oh,
I
so
want it out.
what was it? So what was it about this particular moment in your life? Because you're on the ship, obviously, to celebrate. You're going for this wonderful experience. So what was it that brought all of those memories back to you?
Because the life that I had been living was so horrific and painful. I just didn't want to live it anymore. It's just I wanted a spiritual life. I wanted to be happily married, and that wasn't doing so well. We had a lot of things to overcome. As I said, we both had baggage, and I was done. I was tired of trying, so I just thought, let me slip into the sea, where it's calm, where there's no abuse, no rape, no war, no politics, none of that stuff. And so I started to do it. But the amazing thing is, my breath was heavy and I was sending my breath out. I could feel my breath going out, but I also could feel the breath coming back in, and it was lighter and friendlier and calmer. And it's almost like the scripture. Remember the scripture in the Bible that said, and God breathed into man and he became a living soul? That's exactly what I was feeling. My breath was just blending in with everything that was outside of my body. But when I breathed it back in, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. My pain was lessening up. And I stopped looking to the left where the ocean was and put my attention to the right, and I would see all these twinkling lights. And I'm in the middle of the ocean where there's a lot of light, but this was bright.
Okay.
And I would just focus on it. And it was like a frequency that was saying, you can do this, darling. We're here to help you. We're here to guide you. And it was like they were helping me. Oh, how do I put this so they can explain it well to you? It seems like the energy inside of me was mixing in with all the energy that was on the outside of me. You know, it's like if you take a sponge and you hold it up to the window and you see the light coming through the sponge. That's like what it was like. It's like your skin, your cells are part of all of that. And the light was coming through my cells, and my heavy light was going out, blending in with everything that was comfortable. And guess what? It's very familiar. You're not scared. You've been there before.
Wow.
And you stop blending in with it, and you're happy. And the pain is gone. And I'm going for this. I want to be part of everything that's divine. You're very familiar with that frequency. You're familiar even with your loved ones on the other side. Positive. And one of the best things for me, I've had no religious teaching. So I was able to recognize things on a pure level. What else? The other thing? Oh, so as the Coast Guard is starting to pull the rope up to get the basket into the helicopter, I could feel the propellers going.
Okay.
And it shifted the energy, that wonderful, pure energy I was feeling, just enough for me to shake my head and say, hey, wait a minute here. I just got married less than 3 months ago. My daughter's going through a divorce. My son will never get over this. Because they've seen me go through some stuff. I need to go back. I need to tell them that we can make life work. We can survive all of the things that we have gone through. We just need that guidance. And the guidance is right on the other side of our breath. Please, I have changed my mind. And as I said those words, it was like a stop, just was right there, and the opportunity to cross over was gone. The only thing that came back was the pain. The pain came back, you know, and so they let me come back, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, because I want people to know you do have a chance.
So all this time you had been living, sounds like not only the physical pain in that moment, but that was kind of for you a culmination, all the psychological, emotional pain that you'd been carrying over the years that was hopefully going to be alleviated by going on this cruise with your, well, I guess your husband at one point, but then your best friend. You now have this experience where you realize that maybe life isn't worth living if I have to live with all this pain.
Yeah, why for?
You try by unbuckling or trying to untie yourself from this basket / gurney and slip into the ocean. But then all this, you said this energy, this idea of you mentioned the sponge. I think that's such an interesting metaphor, that the sponge is like how permeable our our cells, our bodies are, right, to spirit. What did you hear anything? Was there a conversation in your mind or some sort of awareness?
It's a frequency. You're aware of it. You know exactly what's going on. Yes, you have your five senses,
Yeah.
but you get the sixth sense. And you may not see it, but that frequency is always there. And you just connect with it. It's like, maybe I should tell you about my brother Danny's when he was ready to cross over. Would you like to hear that?
Yeah, yes, please.
And this will help you to understand what I mean by this.
Okay.
My brother Danny became a paraplegic at 15. And
15?
15 years old, you know, he had an accident and broke his back and shattered his pelvis. And he lived in New Hampshire, and I was in New York, and I would always fly down and I would always see him. When he got older, we knew his life expectancy wouldn't be as long. And now he's a few months from his 50th birthday. And I'm flying up because Danny has developed cancer, but he can't feel it because he's a paraplegic. So now I have got to do everything to prepare him for what's going on the other side. But I have never been there myself. I haven't had a near-death experience. I didn't know.
This is way before you were on this cruise.
Oh,
okay.
But I certainly remember what I told Danny after my near-death experience because I was right, you know. So I would talk to him and I would study Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book to prepare him. And I would go down and I look at my brother and the fear in his eyes took my heart. And I noticed on the coffee table, there was some literature from the nearby congregations. And Danny was being taught some fear things that did not exist, you know, the doctrine of hell and stuff like that. And Danny was frightened of crossing over. He said, I mean, I must have did terrible sin, or why am I paraplegic all my life? And I said, Danny, no God is ever going to punish anybody. It's not his, no. You're 15 years old. You haven't never done anything wrong like that. No, I don't believe in there's such a place as hell. And I went over to him and I went over to the refrigerator because I could see the fear in his eyes. And I went over and I grabbed an ice cube. Where I got this idea, I'll never know. But then again, there's that divine intervention and it's always there. So I took this ice cube and I put it in my brother's hands. And I said, look at that ice, Danny. You're made up mostly of water. That's all we are. And what you've done with that ice cube, you froze the ice cube. And the frequency of the atoms in the ice cube is just slowed down. What is in an atom? What is it? Protons, electrons, and neutrons? Yes. And all of these little particles are at a different frequency in that atom. What keeps them from not bumping into each other? That's that beautiful energy between all the electrons, protons, and neutrons. It's God's source. And you're just going to be blending into it anyways. So now let's take that ice cube and throw it into the boiling water. Now it's just water. And you speeded up the atoms in the water. And now let it boil until it's steam. And there, that water is now steam and it's blending in right with the universe. And that's just what's going to happen to you.
You explained all of this to your brother on his deathbed?
This was shortly before his deathbed.
Oh my goodness.
About a month later, he was in a coma.
Oh.
And I was in New York City, and my sisters are telling me, Darlene, you have to come home. Danny's in a coma. He may not come out of it. But on the way there, I did speak to him for a few minutes while he was conscious. And I told him to remember all the things that we discussed on that day. And I said, I believe Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's done a lot of research. She has to be right. You know, I believe it. And he said he did too. But now he's at the hospital and he's in a total coma.
Wow.
And this is where, I love this sentence. I asked my brother-in-law to please put the phone beside Danny so I could talk to him. And he would say, Darlene, he's in a coma. And I said, give the phone to my sister. So he gave the phone to my sister, Sherry. And I said, put the phone by Danny's head so I could talk to him. And I talked to him. I told him how frightened I knew that he was. But you're going to be okay. That veil is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. All I want you to do is put your toe through it a little bit and see if it's comfortable. If it's your time to cross over, guess what? You're going to do it. Remember all the things that we discussed. And your parents are right there on the other side. They will help you through the process. Now, I'm the bigger sister here. I'm telling you, do it and do it now. I'm the bigger sister. I mean, I bossed him around. And he did it. But just before he did it, he opened his eyes in the coma and he looked at my sisters and said, "Whoopie-doo." Whoopie-doo is a word that Danny only uses when he's happy. He's like, whoopie-doo, whoopie-doo. He's excited. So he was happy with what he saw, with what he's doing. My brother was happy. And then his legs started to move. And everybody backed away from the bed. The nurse, my sisters, my brother, they all backed. Danny's legs hadn't moved since he was 15. Mm. How was this happening? Well, with my own near-death experience, that question was answered. The energy in his body, right through the cells of his skin, was blending with everything that was pure. Everything, every light is very divine. It's just, the frequency was blending in just like that ice cube. It's just changing the frequency. Wow. That's all it is now.
Darlene, what I find so fascinating, I don't know why I'm necessarily fascinated by near-death experiences. I've read many books on this subject. I've not had that experience myself, but the way I hear you describe not only your own experience, but even prior, right, predating that, your own personal experience with death, what you shared with your brother and the peace that you wanted to transmit to him. I'm just curious, what had you want to help your brother embrace death in the way that you explained it to him or in the way that you communicated about it?
I think it was the pain in his eyes. Because before, I mean, Danny, even though he was a paraplegic, he soared. He didn't sink. He soared. I mean, he had a boat. He had a car with hand controls. He was working. He led a life. And now I see fear in his eyes. Fear from what? The training that he's getting from something on the outside that I knew in my gut could not be true. And it wasn't. I wanted to take the fear away just long enough for him to feel that frequency to cross over. Because at the time, I didn't know it was a frequency. But studying of some books, I was getting there. And it's funny, though, after my brother's funeral, my sister and I came through the door. And it was like 3 days later. And everybody remember this. For that 3 days, we were aware of that frequency. We knew it was his, you know. And all of a sudden, you can't feel that big wing hitting you beside of the head, like getting your attention. And he told us that he would blow the hair on my arms, and he did. And I looked at my sister, who has no training that I have had, or no feeling was so different. And I looked at her and I said, "What do you think?" She says, "I think Elvis has left the building." And I said, "Yeah, I think Danny's out trying on those new wings. He's just blending in with what's familiar."
The wings of angel, huh?
Yeah, it's just amazing, the frequency that I felt on the other side. It's so hard to really put it into words, Val, because there's no words. It's just peaceful, happy, familiar. Remember the word familiar, because you're just going back to where you were. So you're bringing that memory of all that stuff right into when you were being born. And it's like with what is the other couple in the Bible, the twins, Isaac and Esau? Remember, they were fighting in the womb before they were even born. Did I ever tell you this? Yeah, I remember it quite clearly. They were arguing, so they had a personality before they were born. Yeah. And it's like I try to explain to my husband, if I said this, then stop me. It's like we're born with a little white T-shirt on.
You haven't, no. What do you mean you're born with a white T-shirt?
Well, we're not. We're totally born with all our innocence. And the nurse comes in and puts this cute little white T-shirt on you. And then everybody comes in to meet you for the first time. And then your mom comes over with a little pin, a little note, and my baby's going to be a doctor. And your dad comes in, my baby's going to be a lawyer. Then the church or whatever community that you're in comes in and puts their beliefs on you. That may not be who you were. Now you've got this scaffolding your whole life, believing all these things were true. When they believed it was true, your parents didn't do anything wrong, so don't go blame them. They believed what they were taught. I always had a hard time believing in everything. I challenged everything.
I can tell. Well, I think first of all, the fact that you saw something in your brother shift the moment he was diagnosed with cancer, and the fear, like you said, that had never been present in his life until that moment. And you're being so compelled to shift him back into this fearlessness, right? Which I think goes back to what you said to us about fear is false evidence appearing real. Like you really helping him connect to that. And then what you just mentioned about the t-shirt. So could it be though, Darlene, I'm curious here, could it be that in your brother's case, for example, that some of the things that were pinned on his t-shirt were true? Not necessarily limited, especially since he was so fearless growing up?
That's a hard question to answer. Danny definitely was a warrior.
Yeah.
He became a wounded warrior, but he was definitely a warrior. And I could never understand. Well, I don't know why my mind is taking me there, but it's taken me to the day that Danny became that paraplegic. Mm-hmm. And he was always so powerful and strong and loved his dad and never blamed his dad. And I always blame my father for the accident because Danny was sitting in front of the American Legion Hall on the day that he had this accident. My dad was going to take Danny fishing, but he didn't. And I learned that he didn't come out because he's with his own war hero buddies. And when you're with that kind of trauma, only another war hero can understand that kind of trauma. Mm-hmm. But Danny got on his bike and was probably going too fast and hit a car and broken his back, shared his pelvis. Oh. I was very close to my mom. This makes me think of LaRue, because my mom said that day when Danny had the accident, because I saw the ambulance go by and I didn't know my brother was in it. I was on heightened alert. I knew something was different. And my mom always said, be aware of your gut feeling, Darlene, because it's trying to tell you something. Like LaRue says, that little whisper inside of you, listen to it. So my mother called and it was the telling us that we had to go to Hanover Hospital because Danny was going to be admitted into surgery immediately. So we got there and Danny was being taken to surgery. Hours later, the surgeon came out. Remember, my mom was married to a war hero. Listen to the words that she said when she found out that her boy, Mrs. Parris, your son's going to live, but he's never going to walk again. She said, at least I won't lose him to a war.
Wow.
Pretty heavy. I remember that always.
Wow.
And Danny did not blame his dad for not coming out. He didn't blame anybody. He never held a grudge. He taught us girls the tremendous power of forgiveness. And he's the one who couldn't walk. I was the one who couldn't walk. I mean, here I am, the one that's the model in New York City, and I can pivot like you couldn't believe. But I was the one carrying around like I couldn't walk. The fear inside of me. You didn't have any. Me.
Wow.
And he was teaching me. So he was helping me with my fears. I needed to help him with his.
At 15. Wow. Let's go back, Darlene. You've alluded to this a few times now. And this notion of your father being a war hero. First of all, to clarify, is World War II, I imagine? Yes?
3 Purple Hearts, 2 Oak Crosses. And it's the funny thing is, him in uniform, oh my God, it's breathtakingly gorgeous. And I can see why my mom melted. He could dance a swing dance and hold her in his arms and sweep her off her feet. But
That's
he was before the war, and then he did bring it home with him. And what
do you mean by that? He brought the war home with him. What can you tell us more about that? He was the
same grounded man that went. So his mother told me that went off to the war. He came back very fractured. And it was hard to put pieces back together again when you experience things like war or any kind of trauma, because trauma is just that frequency that you hold inside. And he was trying to put the pieces back together, but we didn't have things to help our soldiers back then. And so we held it inside because you had to live up to the belief that everybody told you, you save us, you're a war hero, we can look up to you, you're strong, you're powerful, you're this. And you start thinking you are all of these things because they told you you are. You don't deal with the fractured part inside. And I think that's what my dad and I had in common.
So what was happening that he was, that part of him that was fractured showed up? What was happening at home?
Boy, well, my father's the type that when he walked into a room, you got his attention immediately. If you didn't, Yeah, you could probably pick yourself up off the floor. It was just it was just my father's crossed over now, and so I'm not going to go there and hurt him.
Okay,
Okay.
got it. So essentially what you're communicating though is that it was difficult for him coming back from the war with the internal wounds, right? The psychological, emotional wounds of war. And that scar tissue, it
Mm-hmm.
somehow manifested itself in how he led his family.
With a lot of anger. And the
Yeah.
only thing who understood with the anger was the another war hero. And you know, it was funny though, excuse me, I have to sit on my feet. And one of the funniest thing, my father, I guess he knew me quite well because my grandfather's full-blood American Indian, and my sisters and brother, they looked like the American, the Passamaquoddy Indian. I didn't. I had my mother's English face, and my dad I was firstborn. He was kind of upset with that. He always wanted me to look like the Indians. And he was very jealous of mom. My mother was quite attractive. And, you know, men, when they see an attractive woman, they kind of stare. And my father didn't like it at all. And he would always say to me, oh, this is interesting. Darlene, be happy when you're 50 years old, because then you'll have a voice. Men won't look at you, because remember, I'm a lot older now. Men aren't going to look at you, they're going to listen to you. And
Dad said that when you were a kid that
yes,
men wouldn't listen to you until you were 50?
Yes.
Okay.
And
What did he mean by that?
Because people judge people by the way they look. And I would always be judged by the way I look. Yes, at that time, it gave me a very successful modeling career later. But I understood what he meant. And I became as fractured as my dad.
How so?
Well, in the modeling field, I mean, I have a lot of moms come in with their children and saying they would like them to become models. And I try to explain to them the horrors that they could run into. I mean, there's a lot of Harvey Weinstein, Larry Nassar, Bill Cosby. There's a lot of that going on. But of course, now we have Model Alliance, and there's a lot more comfort zone, and people are a lot more aware. And we can have a voice. Before, models did not have a voice, because you're like a private entity. I mean, you're hired, but you can easily be fired if you have an opinion. So you grow up not having an opinion, and all you are is something physical. And I never had an opinion about anything. I just kept it quiet. So eventually you don't know who you are. Wow. And I remember after my father died, I didn't get along well with my dad. My brother Danny, oh, he's something else, that boy. He gave me my father's Eisenhower jacket. And he said, Darlene, I want you to put on Dad's jacket. I mean, here it is, the Purple Hearts, the eyes totally heavy with metal. And I took it to be polite to my brother. But when I moved into New Jersey after I tried to retire, I put on my dad's Eisenhower jacket. And I wore it to work one day.
Okay.
With match my boots and a full circle skirt, you know. And I was model. I got a lot of attention from some of the war heroes, or from men in the elevator, looking at that jacket and saying, do you know how special that jacket is? And they would tell me what they meant, because I did not know what a lot of those things meant. And one day I happened to wear it, and I got into, my husband just came through the door, hi honey. And I wore it, and I took the train, a subway train, into Astoria, where I was picking up my car. And I walked in, and this old man stood up and he saluted me. And these other two boys stood up and said, sit down, you effing old fool. Do you know how many people had to die for her to wear a jacket like that?
Oh.
And now I got my voice. I looked at them and I said, do you know how many times my father, 3 Purple Hearts, put his life on the line so that you could have the guts to say something like that to this poor old man sitting there? Yeah, who's the coward here? Not my dad. And I started to get the point that we're trained to believe so many of these things that are not true.
What was it that you believed when your father said that you wouldn't have a voice until you were 50? What did you believe?
I wouldn't. And then in the modeling career, you don't. You just keep quiet so that you can get that job.
But you clearly believed that you were beautiful, right? You clearly believe.
No, I didn't look like my sisters. I wasn't beautiful at all.
Well, then I mean, I imagine going into a modeling career, right, takes some sort of guts, right? Or there's some impulse that had you decide that was a career. So talk to us about how do you reconcile being told that your voice wouldn't matter until you were 50 and not feeling beautiful? Talk to us about that.
Well, I was living in New Hampshire at the time, and I never thought about being a model. I was going to college. I was going to become a veterinarian. Then I found myself divorced with 2 small babies and no money, and waiting on tables at the Concord Highway Hotel. And this photographer came in and asked if he could do some headshots. And he did the headshots. And all of a sudden, I'm in New York City with my 2 children, and I've started to make a career.
So this random photographer at a diner wanted to take your picture, and that's how you had your.
It wasn't a diner, it was a hotel. You know.
A hotel. I apologize. The hotel, and he. I don't know. Maybe it was some made-for-TV movie in my head that flashed up diner, but it was in a hotel. And he took your headshots, and then out of that, you got a job offer as a model. Is that how it happened?
Yes, and she said she wouldn't be able to use me for commercials because of my accent, Park and Water. That New Hampshire accent would be getting in the way. But I went on and became a fit model. So,
what's a fit model?
A fit model is, well, not everybody is built like those beautiful long-legged women that walk down a runway that's over 5'8". After that part is finished, now they have to be sold to a store. And when they put the order in, now they got to have a woman with a normal body like mine, like yours, just normal. And so the pattern maker makes the pattern, and they put them on a model who has those proportions so that they can grade them up, grade them down, then they get into the store, and you get a nice reorder fit. Oh. I became known as the coat hanger with a mouth, because I would talk to the pattern makers on how to get the correct fit to make that garment blow right out of the stores.
Got it. Okay, so the modeling that you did was about sizing to help the designers create sizes. Interesting. And I am flattered that you would use me as an example of. I mean, I don't know there's anything that would be fit for in modeling, but thank you. I wonder. So let's going back to this idea of not having a voice. So prior to the moment of confronting that gentleman who told the person that was saluting you to sit down. So prior to that, what did not having a voice look like in your life? What impact did that have?
It kept me quiet, too frightened to speak up. It seemed like it's stuck in my throat. And
about what? Speak up about what? What were you experiencing that you chose to remain silent about?
Just a lot of violence, I guess, that went on around me. Not understanding why people fought all the time. Why their best venue was to find the fault of somebody else. I just had a hard time with all of that. And then, of course, I learned in the modeling field, I kept myself quiet until that also got me into trouble.
Staying quiet got you into trouble.
I didn't speak up when, like LaRue always tells you to be aware of that whisper inside of you. And my mom said, listen to your gut feeling. That is there when you get out of your head, and don't ever ignore that whisper, because it's warning you, it's telling you, or it's encouraging you, or it's putting you in it's your gut feeling your soul trying to connect with you on a frequency that you can understand. And see, it's hard for me one day I was attacked, but when I saw that person who did this to me, I knew he was bad. I felt that it was bad. I didn't pay attention to it because I didn't speak up. What was I afraid of? Losing everything, I guess, I created. Maybe I was afraid of hurting another person's feeling. Maybe I was wrong. I was always wrong. My father always told me I was wrong. So it could have been part of all of these things. But it ended me up on the other side of being raped.
Can you take us back to what was it that you were noticing? What was that voice telling you? And what was the context for it to warn you?
That this man was bad. Stay away from him.
Yeah. Are you open to sharing more about that experience?
Yeah, that my husband walked through the door, because this is hard on him. You know, I wrote a book about the experiences in the book. My husband started to edit the book for me. When he got to that, he couldn't read it.
I see.
So he had to put it down.
Okay.
So I didn't want him to hear the rest of it because he's
Mm.
a kind man. And if more men were more like that, then we wouldn't have some of the problems that we're having today. But I've learned not to judge with my near-death experience. And one thing about remember I'm a fit model.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fit in all garments. I mean, I have great shoulders. I fit a lot of coats, suits, and all that stuff. Putting on my dad's Eisenhower jacket, that was one garment I could never fit into.
Mm.
Because I had not been through that kind of a war.
Mm.
But some women have been through the kind of war that I have been through. And they will be there to understand how fractured you become. And it's hard to you get to put the pieces back together again, but the wounds are right there. It's like crazy glue. I mean, you put it back and those wounds will make you a lot stronger than you have ever been. Mm-hmm. The wounds are there. Mm. And anything gets closer to it, it triggers you.
Mm. When you share this idea that having that voice come to tell you, that gut feeling to warn you about someone that could cause harm, and I mean, obviously I want to be very respectful that you don't want to talk about it right now, but the fact that you were or that you were attacked, like you said, how did that impact the trust or the knowledge that that voice is there to serve you after the fact? What was the impact of having had that experience and then knowing that you have to trust that inner voice?
Well, I think that's probably why. Well, I didn't have much of a voice as was before. After this attack happened, I remember walking into model service agency, and there was another model there, one I didn't know. Her name was Andrea Bejarano. And she looked at me. She was a healer. She came over and hugged me, and I felt this power coming out of her. Mm. And she says, I want to show you my real job, Darlene. And because she was a model also. And she took me to the healing clinic, and she started to work on me so that I could have a voice again, so I would stop trembling. The only thing that I could ever speak about was the job, because I had to pay bills. And I let her work on me, and I started to trust. And the frequency and the hurt part started to go where I couldn't even swallow. And then she brought in LaRue. And that's when the healing, with the both of them, I had no choice. I was going to stand up again, and I did. And this time, I wasn't going to sink. I was soaring. And I started to get that Mel. And I was always very strong after all of that. And I'm so thankful to Andrea and LaRue for everything they've done to me. And my good friend Betty, who went on that cruise with me. I can see myself going alone. I have so much to be thankful for. So much that I remember it. I mean, I can do all of this without notes.
What do you mean?
I don't have any notes, and you can talk freely about near-death experience or a trauma because those things are so real.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating that you, at one point in your life, felt that your voice didn't matter, right? That your voice would not be heard, there was nothing of value that you could bring, and that the traumatic experiences that you had, both in flesh and blood, and even some of the emotional trauma that you've mentioned, that all of those things that for someone, I imagine for many people, would shut them down in all different areas of life. It seems to me, at least in what you're describing, that those are the things that empowered you to become outspoken. So the healer that came to you clearly knew that there was something that she could do to serve, to help you. But when you think about what was healed and the purpose that you're now here to fulfill, what comes to mind? Why was it that you were healed? Why did you choose to be healed?
Well, when you start crossing over to the other side, there is no frequency of fear. There's none of that. There's only joy and happiness. And you put everything that you've been taught that's not working, so you just get rid of it. And I really wanted people to know that there is a chance that there's a tremendous chance you can stand up again. If you choose to listen to that gut feeling, to that whisper, you can do this. I did this. And I've been through a lot more than most, but I know I could do this. And now look what I have. I'm married to a man who adores me. I have a beautiful home. I ended a career just a few months ago. I have kids that are healthy. Do you know the spot they would have been in if I did cross over? They wouldn't know that you do have a chance to make it work. My daughter, I told you, went through a horrific divorce. Today, she's strong. I was back to help her, back to show her what she needed to do to stay strong again. And it's funny, though, because when I watch her, when she sees, not just a war hero, because she loved her grandfather, anybody who needs help, she's right there. And I would see her give money to people on the street who were poor when she had no money herself.
Wow. I think it's phenomenal, Darlene, that a woman who didn't have a voice at one point in time, who didn't think that her life was worthy, now comes out on the other side and shows through your own example as a mother, as a wife, as a human being, that is completely opposite. What is this part of your life dedicated to? What is it that you want to accomplish now?
Oh, I'm going to share one thing with you, because my daughter-in-law, Carrie, just recently gave me a baseball cap. She's married to my son. My son is 260 pounds, size 14 shoe, tattoos, Harley, scary as hell. He's a feminist.
Did you say he's a feminist?
And he'll look at me and he'll go, I can't go there, it's politics. So she gave me the hat, boys will be boys, no more. Think about those words. Because we train them just like girls are trained from infancy, that you really don't have much of an identity until you remember, I'm a lot older than you, until you get married to somebody special. So you don't cultivate a career of college or any of those things. And my daughter-in-law is grateful that she's married to a man, and she's blonde, blue-eyed, and kind of on the sexy side. My son has no problem, not jealous, let her speak for herself. If somebody flirts with her, he just stands back and smiles, because they're going to get her fury. And I get the biggest kick out of it. I wish I had her mouth.
Well, I think you do. I think you do. Yeah, it sounds like the white T-shirt that was put on your daughter when she was born maybe didn't have as many pins as,
no.
as yours did. Or the pins were a little different, a different caliber.
What? Stand for herself and have a mouth, and she does. Sometimes it gets into trouble, but she has a mouth.
What do you tell women now, especially? I would imagine your contemporaries, right? Women in your generation who maybe grew up with very similar circumstances, who had fathers or brothers that went to war, that brought the war home with them, like you said, who perhaps didn't feel like they had a voice. There are so many things that were not available to women then as they are compared to today. What do you want them to know?
Usually when they're my age, they usually have daughters or granddaughters, like I do, who are absolutely amazing, because they have the voice that we should have had. And I said, when in doubt, talk to your daughter, talk to your daughter. They're being trained totally different. They don't, we were raised on the book called The Cinderella Complex. Meaning, I know, you'll have to Google this. Meaning you had to be pretty. You had to not be too smart, or the men wouldn't accept it. You had to be all these things that would not let you be your true self. You're too busy keeping that male ego intact. Well, the girls in this generation, I don't think you are.
No.
Not at all. The man who falls in love with you is going to be one amazing human being, because you're going to have a chance to be yourself. And I didn't have that chance. My first husband was that bully type. I married my dad. But I understood my dad when I crossed over. And
what did you understand about your dad?
Well, when I crossed over, it was like the last day in January. And when I came back, my husband had to fly to Puerto Rico to come and get me. And it was a funny thing about that. Oh, I got to tell you this part. Funny thing about that, when they finally they would fly me to Guantanamo. I don't know how to say that word.
Guantanamo Bay.
And then they turned around and took me to Puerto Rico, and they put me on a gurney, and I'm right beside the emergency room, and hour after hour after hour, no one's touching me. And then my girlfriend, Andrea, called in, and I told her what was, she says, what is going on? And I told her what was going on. She said, give the phone to the doctor. And she did, she speaks Spanish. And she told them exactly what she wanted done. You don't fool around with that mouth. And she said, you have an angel laying there, and she's laying on her wings. Come on, give her some help. And they did. But they said, you know, all we can do is make her comfortable. She's not gonna make it, because the poison was all through my system.
Mm.
The next day, I heard this. I mean, I was married to an Italian once. I understand enough Spanish and the Italian language that I understood what was going on. So I fired the doctor and got another one. And that night, they put me in my bed. Andrea called, and we did a healing over the phone. Remember, I was in severe pain.
Mm.
We did a healing over the phone. The next morning, I've got tubes in and out of my body. I haven't been eating. I'm just sitting in a lotus position on my bed, looking at my new doctor. And I looked at her and I said, told you I was going to live.
Mm.
I had guidance that told me I was going to live. There was no way. I don't, even though they had me on, was it 1,500 milligrams of Cipro for over a year.
Wow.
You know, so it was quite a healing. Where was this taking to me? I lost my train of thought.
Well, we're talking about, you know, when you marry someone, that you were able to now experience this voice that you never had. You talked about your daughter and granddaughter, well, the women in your life, in your contemporary set, perhaps now being able to access.
Yes, I love the way this generation of young ladies are being trained, and the boys.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, well, should I bring this in or not? I remember when you go through trauma, you spend years and years and years trying to forget it. It's like you bury it in a certain part of your body. You don't want to deal with it. And when years later, when they ask you to think about it, you have that dead look in your eyes, because it's hard to go back there and remember all the details, because you really do, you know, but you're still fractured. You need to grab a hold of whatever it is and bring it up and heal what it is. And LaRue did do that for me. My voice is cracking.
What is the benefit of healing trauma? I mean, I can see that there are times when not dealing with it, people are able to shut that part down, move forward, raise children, find a job, take care of their family, whatever it is that they're doing in the community. What would be the benefit?
Because you own it. You know that you've healed because you can talk about it. I can talk about it because I know it's healed. Does it take away your breath? Yeah. Because you want to help other people going through the same thing. And you can say, I understand.
I love that. So talk to us about, you said you have a book and you have some information based on what you experienced in your life in this book. Tell us about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, yes, it should be out in about 2 months. It's called Unzipped. Models, Unzipped. Memoir of a fashion fit model. And it's bringing me, I'm exposing it from my childhood on how I lost my mouth right up through the attack or 9/11. I was talking to my brother Danny on the day before 9/11. Remember, I'm living in the city, and I am taking the train into the city, and my daughter calls me and says that the first Twin Towers come down. I guess there's an accident. And I said, okay, I'll come back up. I was on the 3rd step of the subway going down. If I was on the 6th step, I never would have heard this message. But I came back up and I took another train that took me right by the 2nd tower. Just as we passed it, the 2nd one came down. Well, we didn't know. We were in the subway. We didn't know. And I didn't have the news on because I was talking to my brother Danny about his birthday the day before. Well, here we are. The subway is stopped. Door won't open. Well, we are all kinds of nationalities on that subway. And what did we do? We all prayed to the same God. So with different traditions, big deal. Put the training out of the way. Put the doctrines out of the way. One frequency. And you can complicate it or not. And we held hands. One big strong guy got that door open to help us all down. And it was the funniest thing that I remember. Remember I told you I did a lot of coat fittings? There was this one pattern maker, Ilya, a Russian guy. You know how Russian men are boisterous and strong. He was always yelling at the other Russian pattern maker. And I used to get so mad at him. And guess who was on the subway? that little Russian guy that I didn't like.
Mm.
The heat was killing me. The air was something I didn't recognize. It was just strong. And I leaned up against the wall and I started to slide down the wall. And I felt this little bitty arm come around my waistline to hold me up. He was a small frame man. And he held me down.
Mm.
This man, I gave nothing but a horror story every time I worked with him because I didn't like the way he bullied everybody.
Mm.
Held me. And we all got down. We all held hands, except been about 20 of us. And just got through it, praying to the same God. Three days later, I remember I was on the subway again, going into another stop. And there was this lady sitting in front of me and a very prejudiced man sitting to my left. And he was glaring at her. I believe she was, he thought she was a Muslim lady, but she wasn't. She wasn't. I think she was Hindu. And he was staring at her with so much hate and so much anger. And I got up and I went over and I sat beside her. And I looked at him and I said, why don't you study some of your history and garb and know traditions before you stop blaming people and judging them on your particular training? Mm-hmm. He is not who you can't. And I asked him to leave her alone. And that's what we all got to do. We can't judge people from our own training, from our own beliefs. We all can be empowered by our own beliefs. So stop judging everybody.
I love it. I love it. I think what I'm most impressed, perhaps is the word, or I most admire, let's just say the most thing I most admire about you is that voice has not kept you back. I mean, you clearly have a lot of opinions about everything that you've lived through, and that the work that you've done on yourself, the healing that you've accepted, the choices that you've made have all helped you have the voice to now help other people. I see you as a protector. I see you as a defender.
Yeah,
is that how you see yourself? Sorry?
Time to come alive.
Time to come alive. You've come alive, Darlene.
Time to come alive.
So you said the book comes out in a couple of months. Can you tell us where we could find it? Is there a website or?
Well, because they're doing the formatting of the book Unzipped, Chronicles of a Fashion Fit Model. You can get it at www.DarleneParris-Young.com. Paris with 2 R's.
Excellent. I will make sure to put that in the show notes in case people have not had a chance to write it down.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close out our time today?
Just continue to stand and find your voice. And if somebody comes at you with a lousy opinion, just say thank you and walk away. Because no one should be able to take that whisper inside of you. Because guess what? You're going to have to deal with it anyways. You might as well deal with it now. It doesn't go away. Because you have a frequency on that other side that you need to connect to. You're going to be happier when you connect to it.
Hear, hear. Darlene, has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on Time to Come Alive today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for writing a book. Thank you for having us hear your voice and inspiring many others to do the same.
It's funny. I'm hearing my husband's voice says, okay, Darlene, you did it. Now go have a Tito's.
Go have a Tito's.
No. I'm into another kind of spirit here.
Well, thank you all so much for tuning in today to another episode of Time to Come Alive. For those of you who would like to get on our subscription, please go to www.timetocomealive.com. So that way you don't miss any interviews. They'll go straight to your inbox as soon as they're hot off the press. I guess they're not off the press if they're online, but you know what I mean. Next week on February 18th, look forward to having a conversation with Sharon Crane. Sharon is a wonderful woman who's had a lot of opportunities to have her voice heard as well. And she'll talk about what it took for her to be an influencer to other women in her community. So looking forward to that conversation. Hope you all tune in. Thank you for joining us. And Darlene, thank you once again for being with us.
Thank you, Angel Lady.
It's been our pleasure. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.